welcome back to another episode of Rags to Riches. Today we have with us Sister Elizabeth Hughes. Her and her husband actually serve as Mississippi District Youth Presidents for the ALJC. She is involved in so many different avenues. She makes some pretty good cookies for missions, so anybody who's interested, definitely hit her up on that. And also she is the, if I'm not mistaken, she is the Women's Esprit leader for the Mississippi District as well. And so we love Sister Elizabeth. We love the burden that she has for not only for the kingdom of God, but for the District of Mississippi, for the ALJC. And so we want to give her the floor, let her give her testimony this morning, and just kind of let us see where God has brought her and the mighty work that she's doing for the kingdom of God.
Yeah, so I'm thankful to be a part of the Mississippi District. Such great people, awesome people to work with. The Porterfields are doing a great job. Love them and love everybody involved. Awesome people. So I guess I'll jump into my testimony, one of them anyway. So when I was, after my first child, I'm pregnant now, so I'll be having another one here in about a month. But after having Evie, I had postpartum depression, and it was beginning to be talked about. You know, like I think my parents' generation probably, they didn't talk about stuff like that. It didn't have a name. You know, people didn't talk about, well, you've got postpartum depression or you've got postpartum anxiety or whatever. People didn't really talk about that stuff. So it was really unheard of. But now, thank the Lord, it's talked about, so you kind of know what's going on. I remember my granny telling me, she said, now that I look back, I think she said, I'm pretty sure I had postpartum depression, but I did, they didn't know what to call it. She just said, talking about how she felt. And when you look at that, it's like, yes, you definitely did. But she didn't know that. Nobody would talk about that kind of thing, kind of taboo. So thankfully, I think maybe I ran into like a podcast or something where I had kind of learned a little bit about postpartum depression. So I figured that's what I had, but for a long time I didn't know because I didn't know anything about it. My idea of depression was you're just sad and mopey and you just don't really feel like doing fun things and you just kind of cry a lot. That was my idea of depression, and that was not at all the case for me. It was so different than that. I was mad. I was furious, just rage and anger. And that is a secondary emotion a lot of times. So a lot of times, through a lot of people, sadness comes out like anger. So it could be a lot of that. But I definitely was just mad, crazy. And I certainly was crazy. Like when I say crazy, I should have been probably in some sort of facility for a while. It was really bad. And I tell this to people, not because I want everybody to know that I was crazy, but because it's helpful. I think it's helpful when you tell people the real stuff. When I was going through that, I would have given anything for somebody to tell me I've done that. I've acted like that because I was awful. I was awful to my newborn baby. Thankfully, I didn't hurt her physically, but emotionally I did. And it took her because I was so just crazy, just mad and acting crazy all the time, and that's so hard on a newborn baby. All you know is a crazy mother. That's, and that's not right. That's hard. And that's hard for the mom too. other moms that have been through this. It's hard for you to look at your baby and you feel so bad, but you can't change. You feel so stuck and you feel like this will never end and I'll never get better. And I'm just crazy. I've lost my mind. And that's what I thought. I thought I'm crazy. I've lost my mind. And somehow I'm just going to die. I don't know how, but I mean, I can't live like this. I'm just going to die. So that's where I was. Awful to my husband and my newborn baby. And this lasted for me almost a year. That's a really long time to do something to feel that way, to go through something like that. But for 8 months, I didn't really know what was going on. And I kind of had an idea. I was thinking, this is probably depression or some sort of something's, wrong because of my hormones or whatever. And it's a chemical imbalance. And so I went to, I think my husband talked me into letting him go talk to pastor, if I'm not mistaken. And he talked to our pastor and kind of told him what was going on. And my husband talked me into talking to Sister Wilson because he knew that she had been through postpartum depression. And so I did. I talked to her, and that was so awesome. Just talking to somebody that knew where I was, that had an idea what I was going through, because my poor husband did not know what I was going through. He didn't know how to help. He would just say, well, you need to start thinking positive. You need to say positive things. You need to do this, and you need to think this. And all that sounds great, but it's like you feel like you really cannot. You can't get your mind to think right. So I went to the doctor. My doctor put me on some medication, and that allowed me to get my mind back. I could start thinking right again. And after a while, it got better. It took a little bit of time to kind of slowly go away, but it gave me an opportunity to get my mind back so that I could start thinking again, start thinking right, thinking positive thoughts, and get going in a positive direction. And I guess that's all I have to say about that, unless you have a question about it.
No, but as somebody who me and my wife just recently had our little girl back in November, and that you talk about that, and that's a lot of things, not just even the postpartum aspect, but just mental health in general. People kind of just sweep it under the rug, like it's one of those things that you can just. And don't get me wrong, God is mighty, and I know He is, and God can do amazing things. But God also gives us enough sense to, if we have a problem, to seek help. And like you and Brother Austin did, with him going to Brother Vasquez and then you going to Sister Wilson, to get help and allow people to speak into your life that can help you get over these issues. Because like mental health is a real deal, and it's one of those things I think it's become more prevalent here in the church over the last few years, and people have really started to take a notice to mental health, because like there's some things, I mean, you get tired, you get weary. As a man, we have no idea what y'all as women go through in these situations. I know my wife, when we had our little girl, had Ellison, it was a culture shock. And anybody that tells you it's not, it is. Having children will change your life for the better, but it's one of the things that you have to learn how to cope and have to.
It feels like for the worse.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. I mean, we're still on the stage of very little sleep. She's actually teething right now, so that's something that
that's another thing. Having postpartum depression is bad enough, but we didn't sleep. I'm talking about this child did not sleep all night. We had to just pace back and forth and walk her, and as soon as you sit down, she starts crying. And that was for 8 months. Then we did sleep training, and that saved our lives. But
Yeah.
for 8 months, it was just no sleep, depression, and sleep deprivation is hard enough,
Mhm.
and then on top of that, I'm crazy. So you can imagine.
Yeah, like I mean, lack of sleep will enhance, I feel like, any issue that you're dealing with. I mean, and so if you got depression, if you got all these things that are already warring against your mind as it is, and then you add lack of sleep on top of that, I mean, it's just a recipe for disaster, if you ask
Yes,
me.
for me,
But
for
go ahead.
me, it was a physical thing. It was a chemical imbalance. It was hormones and all the crazy stuff that new mothers go through. I mean, for the first time, your body has just birthed a baby. That is very traumatic to your body. And then, so it was a very physical thing and very normal thing. Lots of new mothers go through this, and it can be, you can have 4 children and still have postpartum depression or whatever. But it also became a spiritual thing because the devil loves to jump on people when they're already down. What an opportunity. I'm
Right.
already having a hard time. And so, of course, the devil loves to jump on that and make it worse. And so I was absolutely tormented. My family was tormented. It was a very, very hard time. I
Yeah.
remember one time, I mean, I would just, at night especially, I would just cry and cry. And one time, I don't know what I was getting up to do, but I was trying to get up and walk into my dining room, and I just fell in the floor. I just couldn't even walk. I couldn't even walk anymore. I had cried so hard and been so mentally distressed that my body couldn't physically handle it anymore. And I just fell on the floor. It is such a mental thing, but your mind affects your whole body.
It does.
The way that you think and the way that you feel emotionally affects your whole body.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's one of those things where
So,
it will. I mean, like you said, when you're already dealing with these, well, especially like you said, or like chemical imbalances, things that you physically cannot fix. Like you cannot just like think it away or. And I'm with Brother Austin. I try to be a very positive person and try to think positive and everything.
uh-huh,
Going back to even with us, we're at the point where we're having to transition our daughter into like a permanent car seat that stays in the car. And it's something that may seem very simple to other people, but me and my wife were talking about it, and she was like, "Man, I can't believe how much these things are." And then and so in her mind, she's like thinking the worst because I mean, it's an expensive thing to buy, and but in my mind, I'm like turning, well, hey, this is our last one we'll ever have to pay for. So what? Not like don't stress about it. Don't worry about it. It is what it is. So I'm always trying to think positive. I'm always trying to be positive. But I said, as men, I can say this: like we sit back and we can say think positive when we're not the ones going through it, and we could say, hey, just keep your mind right. Like when you're not the one having to get up and deal with these issues day after day. And this is something that I had to learn, even with in our situation, like there's certain things like and I'm gonna sit here and pretend like in marriage, like you never have disagreements or in all these other things, but like also in those moments where after we first had our little girl, there'd be times where my wife was just like she was just physically like she was wore out and exhausted, and so at times she may say something and I may take it the wrong way, but I had to keep telling myself like, hey, like just like don't let it get to you, like it's just part of it. To the point where I was going to work asking guys who had kids before me, like, man, like how do you deal with this? Like, wait, what do you do? And they would just tell me like, hey, man, it's part of it. You're gonna just grit your teeth and get through it. Like, give it about 6 months, and hopefully everything will be back to normal. But I was disappointed. I was like, man, I can't deal with it. And so, but it's only like me and her's even talked about it since about how like in that moment it was something different and we had to work through it. But with the grace of God and family, that has helped tremendously with us, and same as your brother Austin's situation as well.
Yes, it'll make you work on your marriage. You know,
Right.
you learn so much. I said this so many times. Having Evie has been my biggest learning experience by far. Learning myself, learning how to better my marriage, learning how to lead in a whole different way. I mean, just it's been learning. You learn so much, and you work on yourself because you have to. You have no, if you're gonna raise your children in a good, healthy way, you have to work on yourself.
Yeah, that's true, and you do, because like if we give up on ourselves, I mean, then what's that going to? I mean, how will they have a good life if we just throw in town and say, "I'm done, I can't do it no more"?
We're the example.
Yeah,
We're
you got to be, and you got to keep fighting. You got to. Well, Sister Elizabeth, I don't want to keep you too long. I know y'all are busy. I know we got camp meeting coming up next week, so I'm sure y'all are getting ready for that. But I want to ask you a couple questions, and we'll just go from there. So the first question is, what keeps you motivated in your ministry?
Well, a lot of my ministry right now is raising my 3-year-old. She'll be 4 in November, and we're having another one in about a month. So that is the largest portion of my ministry, and it will be for years until my children are grown, I'm sure. But that keeps me motivated because I have to be the right example, and I have to be a good mother, and I have to raise my children. They need to see Jesus in me every day, and I can't be two-faced. I can't act one way in one place. I can't act one way at church and one way at home. I can't act out in private and in public, act like, like I've got things all together. I've got to be consistent, and I've got to show my children Jesus in me all the time. And that's very hard when they get, oh my Lord, when they start throwing fits. It just makes me mad to think about it right now. They just start. My 3-year-old, she's very smart, and she's very good, but she's 3, and she knows how to throw a fit, and that just tests me.
Mm-hmm.
That's so hard. It's such a hard thing to keep it together. Okay, now, and this is what I pray, that I would show the attributes of love, that I would show the characteristics of love, because God is love, and the Bible talks about love is patient. That whole thing. It's First Corinthians. Yeah, First Corinthians. But all of that, I want to show my kids that. I want to example that to them. And whatever I model for her, that's what she'll be.
Right.
So that motivates me. I want to be good for my children. And also, outside of that, just people motivate me. I like to help people. That's what I just strive for, I guess. I want to help people. And I think a way to help people is to be real with people. I don't think you can help people if they think that you're some untouchable human, like some superhuman that doesn't have issues. Because first of all, it's hard to open up to somebody like that. It's hard to talk to somebody like that when you feel like they're not even a real person. But if we could just be real with people, and talk about depression or whatever. A lot of times when we start telling people about those things, they start telling us about their things, and then we can help. So people motivate me.
Yeah. Amen. That's good. And yeah, like you said, just about your children, modeling a good example of a good godly woman to me will go a long way. I know at times, like our pastors even said to us at times, he's kind of wondered, like, well, did I do this right or did I do that right? And we had an elder in our church actually tell him, our pastor, and told him, he said, you did what you thought was best in that moment. And
Yeah.
so as parents, we may not always get everything right, but if we can continue to do what we know is right in those moments, they'll see those things and they'll grow from that. And so that's one thing as a dad, not a mother, because I know my mother's love and a father's love, two completely opposite things. A dad loves differently than a mom does, but as a dad, that's the one thing that my goal is to always make sure that I'm the best example of a godly example to her. That way, one day she'll grow up and say, "Hey, my dad raised me to be like this," and so that's why I'm going to continue to stay in that. And so that's mine and Kayla's goal has been from day one. Then you said with people, just continuing to reach. If you don't have a burden for people, then not trying to be negative, but I don't see how far your ministry could really grow if if
Yeah.
if there's not a love for people there. Because
that's not ministry at all.
No, it's not, and that has to be at the forefront of your mind at all times is loving people and winning people. Because if we can't do that, then we're really just wasting our time.
Yeah.
But next question, Sister Elizabeth, how do you improve your leadership skills? I know with being like youth pastor's wife and then youth pastor or youth president's wife as well, there's a leadership role that you carry in that as well. I know ultimately Austin has that position or title, whatever you want to refer to it, but as his wife, you're his help in that. And so in that leadership role, what keeps you motivated and what keeps you, how do you improve on those leadership skills?
Practically some things that I like to listen to podcasts. I listen to a lot of Dear Young Married Couple, and they have a lot of helpful things with marriage and parenting and leadership, all kinds of that, all of those things. Also, Craig Rochelle has a great podcast on leadership. Awesome stuff, great tips and practical things to do. So that's what I do like to learn. Also, and of course, stick to biblical principles. You learn from the Bible, I guess that's the things that I do to try to work on myself as a leader.
Yeah. And I mean, I haven't listened to much of the Dear Young Married, but I know the Craig Rochelle, which like you referred to, I've listened to it, and it's some very impactful stuff as far as leadership and ministry goes. I remember listening to the one he listed the I think it was 6 negative types of leadership and then 6 positive types, and was talking about the different types of stuff. And so that in itself will help you tremendously to figure out what kind of leader you want to be. And so basically just keep like glean things from other people, and some may not be apostolic, some may be apostolic, but at the end of the day there is some wisdom and there is some knowledge there that you can take.
Yes.
But like you said, as long as you're staying within biblical principles and what we believe as apostolics, continue to keep that as the number one thing, but always find room to grow and always find room to continue to improve on leadership.
Yes.
All right, Sister Elizabeth, last question here, and I won't keep you too much longer. What advice would you give a young woman who may be seeking some form of ministry right now?
Well, ministry's not hard to get into. You just find somewhere to serve. Ministry is serving. You find something that needs to be done and you do it. And there you go. You're in ministry.
I agree. And that's the ultimately I've talked about before in other episodes that we've done of this. And then just constantly keep a servant's mindset. Always want to keep that mentality that no matter what, whether it's cleaning the bathrooms at the church or leading worship, whatever is asked of you to do, just do it. Like, and don't sit there and make it seem like this is actually a conversation me and my pastor had last week. I was talking to him, and one of the very first jobs, I say jobs, if you want to call it that, that our pastor's wife, Sister Contreras, asked us to do, or asked me to do when I first started coming to Souls Harbor, was to bring water to the pulpit for ministers before they preach. And that's one thing I told him. I said, no matter where my ministry takes me, no matter where it goes, I mean, where God may open some amazing doors on the road, but I never want to get above carrying water, because to me, that's where it started for me here at Souls Harbor. And also too, I never want to get above the small things. I never want to feel like I'm too good to do what is asked of me. And I feel like that's something that has to always stay at the forefront of your mind as well.
Something that I lead our youth music team. And we've talked before about if you're going to be on the platform, you also need to do something not on the platform.
Right.
If it's all about the spotlight, then your motive's wrong.
Right.
If you're not willing to help in other areas regularly, not just, well, I took the garbage out one time. No, if you're not willing to serve in an area regularly that nobody sees you, then you shouldn't be on the platform. That's what we talk about anyway. Right. But I've heard it said, and it's biblical, that the higher you go in your like your title, the lower you really go.
Right.
Because it's humbling and it's more servanthood and it's taking more out of you. And that's very true. At least it should be.
Right.
Because it's got to all come from the right motive, from the right heart, from love. Everything has to be done in love for people. And if we lose that, then it just becomes about status or whatever, popularity. And that's not what this is about at all. We can lose focus easy sometimes. It's right. About serving people, loving people, helping people, all about people. Mm-hmm. And also, this is something that I'm learning right now. Me and Austin are kind of in like this life transition, trying to balance everything. Because in ministry, we kind of think it's like a badge of honor when we're so busy in ministry and in leadership that we don't have time to breathe. We feel good about ourselves sometimes when we're so busy that we don't have time for friends. We don't have time for anything recreational. We don't have time for our families. We don't have time to do anything other than church work, ministry type of things. And that is no badge of honor. There's got to be balance in leadership. There's got to be balance in ministry. Right. And family does come first. Of course, God comes first, but God organized it so that family comes first. Amen. We should not neglect our families to be doing church work. There's so much to do. There is so much to do, and it seems like there's so few people to do it a lot of times. And so all the load falls on the few people that are willing to do it. And that can get very busy and very time consuming. But there has to be some boundaries and some balance to it. Because if you're working all day, every day, you don't have weekends, you don't have days off, then your family is neglected. And that's your number one ministry, right, is leading your family, leading your children. So this is kind of like this transition that we're in. Austin's learning to say no. He's a worker. He will work and he likes to work. He likes to get things done and he likes to be at the church. When we first got married, I had to call him a lot of times at like 7, 8 o'clock. I'm like, are you coming home? Like, we're married now, and you should probably come home sometimes, because he would work. He loves to work. But we're he's worked on that a lot. He comes home now at a decent time. But there has to be balance, because if you're winning the world but you're losing your family, you're not winning at all.
Mm-mm.
There's got to be some balance in that. And I think that's something that a lot of leaders need to hear, because we don't hear it very often.
Yeah, that's true.
We always hear people preaching, get involved, serve, be involved in the kingdom of God, get your hands on something, work on something. That's all we hear. Nobody's telling us, take a day off.
Right. I agree. And I mean, and that's like, there are some times where it's a busy, like you have busy times, like I said, we got our district camp meeting coming up this next week. And so for me and my wife, our only free nights we have right now for next week is Monday and Tuesday night. And so that's one thing that we have decided, that, hey, Monday, Tuesday, we're not doing nothing. Come home and rest, because we know that come Wednesday night on up into Friday, it's going to be nights of getting home late, very little sleep. And so we want to make sure that we can still function as much as possible with a 8-month-old baby, and still be able to not just be completely drained and just taking it out on whatever, each other, whatever. And that's not always the case, but it's just sometimes it makes it easier that way, because of being like we said a while ago, lack of sleep can really do a number on you. And so go ahead.
For a long time, we had Tuesday nights that we scheduled off, and we had to turn down Bible studies on Tuesday nights. People asked us to do different things on Tuesday nights, but we said Tuesday nights is our family night. We're going to be home together. And there were, rare times that didn't get to happen either. But we have, for a very long time, one night a week. And it's been different lately because it's summer. Everything's different in the summer. Things are just crazy. But we scheduled Tuesday nights, and that's the only night we had together, just to be together, and nothing else scheduled for, I don't know, a long time. But honestly, one night a week with your family and no other quality time together is not enough.
No.
And so, and it's so hard. It's so hard to put things down, like turning down Bible studies. Right. Because like I said, if you're winning the world and losing your family, you're not winning.
No, you're not.
So it's hard. It's very hard to turn things down like that. Opportunities that look so good and you want to do it, but you just can't do everything.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, at some point and that's one thing, anybody that knows at our church that knows Sister Cottrell, that's one thing that she preaches heavily to everybody, is balance. I mean, you got to have a balance in everything that you do. Because if you pour every bit of yourself in the church, then like you said, your family will suffer. If you pour everything into your family, then your church life will suffer. And so there has to be a balance where you have to understand that, like the Craig Rochelle podcast we're just talking about, that's one thing he talks about in there. Like, there are some non-essential, or there are some non-negotiables, I should say, that he does not deviate from at all. One being his sermon prep time. That's a non-negotiable. He said, as a pastor, I have to have that time to prep for Sunday morning and Wednesday night, whatever it is. He's very big on physical fitness. He said, my workout times, non-negotiable. I have to have those to keep my mind clear, to keep a level head. And then he said, my family time is non-negotiable. At night, at a certain point in time, he said, I clock out and I go home and I'm done till the next day. And I feel like that, and oftentimes that's how it needs to be, especially if you're not a pastor yourself. If you have a full-time job, you have to make sure that, just like your job, you have very little time anyway with a full-time job and ministry. So in both, you have to clock out at some point and give your family your attention.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, well, Sister Elizabeth, I appreciate you coming on today. It's been awesome. Your testimony was great. I appreciate you. And so until next time, we love you guys and we appreciate the work that you and Brother Austin do for the District of Mississippi.